Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. Today we're wrapping up our topic of family and recovery. Families can be the most supportive component in one's recovery and the least. Today I'll be joining by myself. It'll just be me today as we're wrapping up this month. I'm going to share my own insight and what I've learned from others. But as I always begin, is a disclaimer. If you are in crisis, please seek appropriate professional help immediately. The crisis hotline in the United States is 1-800-273-8255. It's a national suicide prevention lifeline. I encourage all those listening to find what is available in your area. It's that time of year. We're in November. Families are gathering. And for some, it can be problematic. For some, it brings on a lot of pain, whether there's loss of family members or friends that are no longer there, or relationships that are lost, or may seem unrepairable. George Bernard Shaw had this interesting insight. He said, people who say cannot be done should not interrupt those who are doing it. Sounds pretty brash, sounds kind of rough around the edges, but in recovery and from my experience and what I've seen in others, when someone is struggling in recovery, it's very easy for not even myself, for people around them to point the finger of how little they have done or what they should have done. It can be even harder for those in recovery internally to do anything as things get harder to enjoy around them. The fact is, the fear that can be real that surrounds family and friends, those who want the best for that individual, and the idea of avoiding every misstep, tying their shoelaces all the time throughout life, even with the wisest instructions, can be the most can be a big stumbling block. The idea of not wanting handouts or whatever, the idea is things are better stuck when we are able to internalize and grow and move forward on ourselves. If it's always done for us, it does something to us internally, especially those in recovery. And the idea of avoiding every misstep is problematic, because then there's no room for ever making a mistake. Everyone needs a house to live in, but a supportive family is what builds a home. You know, in recovery, and especially nowadays, housing and a place to stay is often an issue. Housing in general is an issue. Depending on the person's age or social and economic status, families often scramble to find family members a residency, a house, and not a home. I'm not saying it's easy, because recovery is messy. But I would say it may be a short-sighted to ignore the idea of building a home and not just a house. Because if you avoid the idea, just like I said earlier, it can be harder internally for those recovering to want to do anything. If it's just about checking off the boxes of what to do or how right I am for doing this, as we learned with COVID, as we learned with everything in life, there's a lot of uncertainty. Providing and addressing the idea of building a home and not just a house impacts the environment, which environment doesn't just include the walls. It also includes the environment and the relationships in that home. that's building. It is not, there's no easy or quick fix. There's a lot of, and when I think of that, I think about this time of year. I think about how much emphasis it is of how wonderful it was 10 years ago. But I would argue, what about now? What about next year? I remember Viktor Frankl, in the book Man Finding Meaning, he saw, he saw some of the Jews, his fellow Jews, giving out half their bread to those who are struggling. They were, and some may say, well, they're giving away the sustenance that will maintain them. And I would argue the one difference, the major difference, was that they thought there was another day. That was it. It wasn't about, so sustenance doesn't just come in the form of food and bread. It also comes in the idea that there's more out there than just building a house. However, being one in faith, I am encouraged to the idea of forgiveness. Anger and rightness never really, in my experience, healed anything. It's good to learn from those who've learned before, so you can avoid some missteps. But when I mention the word rightness, it usually stems a lot with fear. This is from Aristotle, and this is the first portion. It says, anybody can be angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person and the right degree and at the right time for the right purpose in the right way, that is not within everybody's power, and it's not easy. Aristotle's point is, we can be angry, and it's important for us not to be upset or shamed the idea that we're angry. But anger just indicates that something needs to change. And a lot of times it's not just the other person, maybe ourselves that need to change. So it's like, I'm going to read this again. There's a lot of degrees. We could be so right of what was wrong, but we don't always have all the context that surrounds that given person or situation. Somebody would be saying, well, that's, I don't have time for that. Well, that's the whole point. I feel that anger is a good indicator, but it's not a good force to be driven by. Holidays can be a very painful time for many of us. And part of what I've been saying is setting boundaries. Boundaries is always seen negatively, but if you're not able to, quote unquote, set boundaries, you're showing yourself less and less respect. If I have to be there at that time or else, as kids, I remember that, there's always that kind of structure. But moving forward, I think boundaries, especially in our adult lives, as we grow in our families, and as we remember that, those times, those 10 years ago that were so wonderful, why can't they happen today? Why can't they happen now? Why can't the best Thanksgiving, why can't the best holidays be the ones that haven't happened yet? But a lot of us are stuck saying what was versus what is. I would argue the only person who gets upset about setting boundaries are the ones who were benefiting from you having none. A lot of this is painful. A lot of this will take time for all of us to sift through, Eve. And that's a wonderful thing about a safe place or a home. It's not about me, whatever I say here, being absolutely right. I'm sharing what I've learned and what have been helpful for me. And maybe it may be helpful for you. But all that said, I also want to indicate and also share that this is a hard time. And I'm not minimizing that. So for those who are struggling or who are thinking, okay, I am done. That's a lot of work. I've been through so much. I've done so much. Why? I would encourage you to call this number if you are thinking about ending your life. 1-800-273-8255. It's a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Some may say, well, the holidays are a time of joy and Thanksgiving. But I feel that's so short-sighted of how complex, the contrast of what you had and what you don't have can be crippling. And this time is especially hard for those who remember those nicer times. So I encourage those who are watching, who are listening, or know someone who's struggling to call 1-800-273-8255, National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I encourage also those to find what resources are there. Don't wait till the last minute. Find what's out there in case someone, including yourself, needs that help. I know this Chinese proverb I ran into, but it's not sounds probably many of you might have heard it in different kind of ways, but it goes, I was angered for I had no shoes, then I met a man who had no feet. I've met and worked with many different people, and the quality or the level or the price tag of a house wasn't determined on how much joy that family or person had. I've seen people with little to nothing having the biggest joy. Like it didn't make sense in my mind. I'm like, how can this be a house? How can they be content? Then I felt like maybe they were just, maybe it was just on the server. Maybe but they were repeatedly happier than those who had more. So I'm not saying it's easy, but along with forgiveness is practicing gratitude. And like I said, it's not easy. And I feel a lot of times, whether you're faith-based or not, I would say most of us would recognize that fear usually has a negative impact in families, and especially if it's unchecked or not even realized. So this one quote from Edward Albert just says, fear is the only true enemy, born of ignorance and the parent of anger and hate. Anger is not a dirty word. Anger is not bad in itself, but defining what role it plays in your life is important. Final thoughts. Well, this month, when this airs, it will be Thanksgiving. Many people will be gathering, breaking bread per se, remembering. I would say during this time, reflect on what and how maybe the arguments or the family members or the traditions or whatever that may have been something you missed or someone you missed. I would say ask yourself, and I'm asking myself too, why does our best Thanksgiving or our best holiday season or whatever this time of year means to you, why does it has to be Why is the best time have to be years ago? Why can't it be today? Why can't it be something that we haven't even experienced yet? The idea that I'm challenging myself and anyone listening is that it's good to remember the good times. It's good to remember those people who are not here fondly, celebrating their lives. But I would encourage those who are listening during this time of family around the world, mostly more parent in the U.S., but I would encourage those just in the basic idea of family to remember those who remember the good times, but also have hope that there's better times to come. I know it's a crazy thought, but for me, I feel when we have another day coming, if we have something to look forward to, the journey of life, this idea of family recovery doesn't seem so basic, doesn't seem so unrelatable. Everyone has their own journey and everyone has their own ideals. But at the same time, the journey of recovery is one step at a time. And I'm just sharing some of the insights that has helped me. And I hope that the other people who have spoken, who are on the idea of family recovery, as we continue onward, next month will be it's not the end, finding hope. Continuing to address this time of year. But this month, as we wrap up, is about family. And like I said, in the very beginning, family are the ones that can be the most supportive component to one's recovery or the least. Those who are recovering and the families connected to them all are a part of this discussion. So I appreciate those who are listening and continue listening. But at the end of the day, I encourage you to hope that there is more. At the very least, I would encourage those who are listening to think about or to ponder about this quote right here. Everyone needs a house to live in, but a supportive family is what builds a home. I also want to say to those who are listening that to stay updated with Revive Ministry through all the various platforms, ReviveMinistryFL.com is our website. And then these are the other platforms, we have on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We have a channel. This is goodbye from Revive Ministry Podcast. I really just want to say, as this year wraps up, I want to thank each and every one of you. I know each video, maybe one might be more digestible, one might be more meaningful, and that's the point. I encourage those who want to be a guest or wants to learn more or be a part of Revive Ministries in any capacity to just email me at info@reviveministriesfl. I'm trying to write this. fl.com. And just share how you think if you want to be a guest, if you know someone who could be a good guest, please, I find having new and diverse guests and returning guests really, really is important to me. And along that is creating this space for us to just talk about these topics that are increasingly hard to talk about. But without being long-winded, this is goodbye from Revive Ministries Podcast, leaving with the last quote. Taking care of yourself is part of taking care of others. Have a great holiday.